In a small, closely knit community where trust and authority were paramount, a devastating secret threatened to unravel the lives of its most esteemed leaders. Beneath the polished appearances of justice and order, a forbidden affair between a prominent figure and a vulnerable young woman sparked a chain of betrayal, anger, and violence. What started as a concealed relationship soon escalated into a confrontation so intense it left the town in shock and forced everyone to face the sinister forces of power, corruption, and desperation. In 2010, Laurel, Mississippi, was home to District Judge Lamar Jefferson, 52, who had overseen the county's legal matters since 1999. A divorced father of two adult children, Jefferson commanded respect with his tall build, impeccable appearance, and commanding presence in the courtroom. Sheriff Malcolm Brooks, 45, had become a key figure in local law enforcement after relocating from Alabama, following his military service and the death of his wife from cancer in 2005. His tragic loss left him raising his daughter, Belle, alone. Despite his personal hardships, Brooks's dedication to public service and his no-nonsense approach to law enforcement earned him repeated terms as sheriff, including his latest re-election in 2008. To the public, Jefferson and Brooks were seen as a strong team, with their partnership in law and justice frequently on display at community events, shared meals, and participation in civic organizations. Their visible cooperation reassured residents that justice was being served. However, beneath this surface of respectability, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Female defendants in Jefferson's courtroom quietly began to share troubling stories of uncomfortable encounters with the judge, suggesting a pattern of abuse of power. Allegedly, Jefferson used his authority to coerce vulnerable women into compromising situations. Courthouse staff noticed suspicious trends in sentencing, especially in cases involving young female defendants, but remained silent out of fear of professional repercussions. Jefferson's influence stretched beyond the local courthouse into state politics, forming a protective shield around him. His connections throughout Mississippi's legal and political networks made him appear untouchable, discouraging potential whistleblowers. Local law enforcement, including members of Brooks's department, were aware of the complaints against Jefferson, but consistently avoided taking action. Deputy Morris Bennett became instrumental in maintaining Jefferson's system of exploitation. Serving as a trusted member of Brooks's department for 8 years, Bennett acted as an unofficial go-between for the judge's personal dealings. His presence in the courthouse often aligned with private meetings between Jefferson and female defendants or probationers, raising questions about his role in facilitating these inappropriate relationships. The carefully managed image of the town began to deteriorate in late summer 2010 when Sheriff Brooks began to notice disturbing changes in his 17-year-old daughter, Belle's behavior. The once outgoing teenager grew increasingly withdrawn, making frequent, unexplained visits to the courthouse after school. Brooks initially attributed her behavior to typical adolescent changes combined with the ongoing grief from her mother's death. However, the situation took a dramatic turn when Brooks discovered his daughter's phone number, saved in Judge Jefferson's personal cell phone. This discovery set off a series of events that would expose years of systematic abuse within Laurel's justice system and lead to a confrontation with tragic consequences. Judge Lamar Jefferson's public image concealed a methodical system of exploitation that had developed over his years on the bench. His scheme targeted vulnerable female defendants and probationers, using his position to manipulate them into compromising situations. The pattern became clearer as more women cautiously shared their experiences. They described how Jefferson would initially present himself as understanding and sympathetic in court, offering second chances only to later suggest through private meetings that favorable outcomes could be secured in exchange for sexual favors. Those who complied received lighter sentences or more favorable probation terms, while those who refused often faced harsh consequences, including longer jail time. Deputy Maurice Bennett played a crucial role in facilitating Jefferson's actions. As a trusted law enforcement officer, Bennett arranged private meetings between Jefferson and his victims, escorting them to the judge's chambers after hours and ensuring their privacy. Sometimes, he even delivered explicit messages about cooperation being in their best interest. His involvement lent legitimacy to Jefferson's manipulative actions, providing a layer of protection due to his law enforcement status. Sheriff Malcolm Brooks had maintained a close professional relationship with Jefferson for years, viewing him both as a friend and a reliable partner in law enforcement. Their families had shared holidays, and Jefferson had been a source of support after the death of Brooks's wife. This personal connection made the discovery of Jefferson's true nature even more devastating. The first signs of trouble emerged when Brooks noticed changes in his daughter Brielle's behavior. The once outgoing 17-year-old became increasingly reclusive, spending more time at the courthouse and avoiding family events. Her grades slipped, and she became anxious whenever her father mentioned his work with Jefferson. On September 28, 2010, during a routine meeting with Jefferson to discuss county legal matters, Brooks realized he needed to make an urgent call to his department. Claiming he had left his phone in his vehicle, he asked to borrow Jefferson's. While accessing the phone, Brooks discovered something that stopped him in his tracks. His daughter's number, saved under a suspicious contact name, accompanied by text messages revealing an inappropriate relationship between the judge and Brielle. The messages showed a disturbing pattern of grooming, with Jefferson initially offering mentorship and guidance about college applications and legal careers, but later becoming more personal and suggestive. He attempted to convince Brielle that their connection was special and meaningful, manipulating her trust by leveraging his authority and his friendship with her father. Confronting Jefferson immediately, Brooks demanded an explanation. The judge attempted to downplay the situation, claiming the messages were merely innocent mentoring and accusing Brooks of overreacting. However, under Brooks's intense questioning, Jefferson's facade began to crumble. His justifications only fueled Brooks's growing rage. That evening, Brooks had the painful task of confronting his daughter about the situation. In an emotional conversation, Brielle revealed the full extent of Jefferson's manipulation, explaining how the judge had spent months building trust, using his position and relationship with her father to make her feel special and mature. Jefferson had convinced her that their relationship was acceptable despite the vast age and power differences. The revelation of Jefferson's predatory behavior marked a breaking point for Brooks. The betrayal was twofold. Not only had Jefferson abused his position as a judge, but he had also violated the personal trust of a close friend by targeting his teenage daughter. October 12, 2010, began as a typical autumn day in Laurel, Mississippi. Sheriff Brooks spent the morning handling routine police matters while grappling with the devastating knowledge of Judge Jefferson's actions toward his daughter. At 12:30 p.m., the two men met for their usual lunch. Witnesses later described the atmosphere as noticeably strained. During the meal, Jefferson maintained his usual commanding presence, discussing ongoing cases and courthouse business as if nothing had changed between them. Brooks, typically engaged in these conversations, was unusually quiet and visibly distracted. As they finished their meal, Jefferson suggested they continue their discussion in his chambers, citing sensitive legal matters that required privacy. Security cameras captured the two men walking through the courthouse corridors at 1:45 p.m., their body language revealing the tension between them. Jefferson led the way with his characteristic air of authority, while Brooks followed with deliberate steps. Once inside the judge's chambers, the pretense of civility quickly dissolved. Brooks produced printed copies of the text messages between Jefferson and Bell, which he had obtained from his phone, exposing the truth. The messages discovered on his daughter's phone revealed a deliberate pattern of manipulation. Jefferson had progressively escalated from offering emotional encouragement to making inappropriate personal remarks and suggesting secret meetings. Jefferson's response to the confrontation became the catalyst for the events that followed. Instead of showing regret, he tried to assert control by using intimidation. He reminded Brooks of his political connections, implying that exposing their conflict would ultimately harm his daughter more than him. Jefferson warned that her reputation would be permanently ruined if the details of their relationship were made public. This threat against his daughter's well-being broke Brooks, and in a moment of overwhelming protective instinct, he drew his service weapon, a standard Glock 22, and fired 4 shots in quick succession. 3 bullets struck Jefferson in the chest, while the 4th hit his shoulder. As Jefferson fell, the sound of gunfire echoed through the courthouse at 2:03 p.m., plunging the building into chaos. Court security officers and deputies rushed toward the judge's chambers, their footsteps pounding down the marble halls. Several courthouse employees reported hearing the shots, followed by an eerie silence. When deputies entered the chambers at 2:05 p.m., they encountered a scene they would never forget. Judge Jefferson lay motionless behind his desk, blood spreading across his expensive suit. Sheriff Brooks stood nearby, his service weapon placed calmly on a table. Without resistance, Brooks put his hands behind his back and quietly stated, "He took advantage of my daughter. I couldn't let it go." The responding officers, many of whom had worked with Brooks for years, now found themselves in the unprecedented position of arresting their own sheriff. Deputies secured the crime scene while courthouse personnel began emergency protocols, evaluating the building and contacting relevant authorities. Within moments, news of the shooting spread through Laurel's tight-knit community. State investigators arrived soon after to take control of the investigation due to the high-profile nature of the case, involving both the county sheriff and a district judge. The crime scene investigation revealed that all 4 shots had been fired from close range, indicating a personal and deliberate confrontation rather than a spontaneous struggle. As Brooks was escorted from the courthouse in handcuffs, the seriousness of the situation became evident to all. A respected law enforcement officer had taken the law into his own hands, choosing violent retribution over legal justice. In the wake of Judge Jefferson's death, state investigators combed through years of legal records, communications, and surveillance footage. Their efforts quickly uncovered a systematic pattern of abuse that had persisted throughout Jefferson's tenure on the bench. The first victim to speak out was Sarah Martinez, who had appeared before Jefferson in 2008 on minor drug charges. She detailed how Jefferson had offered to reduce her sentence in exchange for sexual favors, with Deputy Bennett acting as a go-between for private meetings in Jefferson's chambers after hours. Wallace had kept a journal documenting her encounters, noting dates, times, and specific threats made by both Jefferson and Bennett. As the investigation unfolded, a clear pattern emerged. Jefferson primarily targeted young women aged 18 to 30 who were facing legal troubles and lacked the financial resources for proper legal representation. Court records revealed suspicious sentencing patterns, with women who complied with Jefferson's demands receiving lenient sentences, while those who refused faced maximum penalties. Deputy Bennett's role as a facilitator became more evident through victim testimonies. He used his position in the sheriff's department to monitor victims, arrange meetings, and ensure their silence through intimidation. Bennett's phone records showed hundreds of communications with Jefferson outside normal working hours, often coinciding with victims' reported encounters. The evidence against Jefferson and Bennett continued to grow as investigators uncovered surveillance footage from the courthouse. Although many encounters had been strategically avoided by the cameras, some recordings showed Bennett escorting women to Jefferson's chambers after hours. Additionally, recovered text messages between Jefferson and Bennett revealed coded communication about arranging meetings with various victims. Digital forensics experts recovered deleted messages from Jefferson's devices, revealing communications with at least 15 victims over a 3-year period. These messages demonstrated a calculated approach to grooming victims, beginning with offers of help before escalating to explicit demands. Financial records also suggested payments from Jefferson to Bennett, indicating compensation for his role in the scheme. The investigation also revealed attempts to silence previous complaints. Several victims had tried to report Jefferson's behavior to various authorities, but their complaints were systematically buried or dismissed. Local law enforcement officials, excluding Sheriff Brooks, had heard rumors, but claimed there was insufficient evidence to investigate the powerful judge. Jennifer Reynolds, a former courthouse clerk, provided crucial testimony. She described witnessing young women leaving Jefferson's chambers in distress and seeing Bennett's intimidating presence during these encounters. Reynolds had kept detailed notes of these incidents, fearing retaliation. The scandal sent shockwaves through the state's legal community. The State Bar Association launched its own investigation into other potential misconduct within the district, and several legal advocacy groups began reviewing past cases handled by Jefferson, identifying dozens that warranted appeal due to potential judicial misconduct. Sheriff Malcolm Brooks's trial began in December 2010, drawing national media attention to the small town of Laurel. The defense, led by attorney Robert Mitchell, built their case around the legal concept of extreme emotional disturbance, arguing that Brooks's actions were triggered by an overwhelming paternal instinct to protect his daughter from a predator. Mitchell presented Brooks's background as a decorated military veteran and long-serving law enforcement officer, describing how his daughter, Belle, had become the center of his world after his wife's death. Former colleagues spoke of his unwavering integrity and commitment to justice. The defense's key witness, Dr. Patricia Sullivan, a forensic psychiatrist, evaluated Brooks after the shooting and testified that Brooks experienced a severe emotional breakdown upon discovering Jefferson's predatory behavior. Dr. Sullivan explained that the combination of betrayal by a trusted friend and the threat to his daughter created immense psychological pressure, leading to temporary impairment of judgment. However, state prosecutor James Anderson presented evidence suggesting Brooks's actions were more deliberate than impulsive. Former courthouse employees testified about previous complaints regarding Jefferson's behavior that had crossed Brooks's desk. Internal police records revealed that at least 3 women had attempted to file complaints about Deputy Bennett's intimidation, but these reports had been dismissed without proper investigation. Sarah Turner, a former probation officer, testified that she had approached Brooks in 2009 with concerns about Bennett's unusual involvement with female probationers. Brooks had dismissed her concerns, claiming she was overreacting. This testimony supported the prosecution's argument that Brooks had ignored the corruption until it personally affected his family. The prosecution also highlighted the premeditated nature of the confrontation. Security footage showed Brooks entering the courthouse with a calm demeanor, suggesting the shooting wasn't an impulsive act of passion. The medical examiner's testimony about the precise placement of the shots further undermined the defense's claim of temporary insanity. Central to the trial was Belle Brooks's testimony, which proved emotionally charged for everyone present. Now 18, she described how Jefferson had gradually manipulated her, using his position and connection to her father to gain her trust. She recounted Jefferson's threatening behavior during the final confrontation with her father, leaving the courtroom in shock. Belle Brooks's testimony provided essential context for understanding her father's state of mind. The trial deeply split the community. Local business owner Frank Murphy organized rallies in support of Brooks, arguing that any father would act similarly when confronted by a predator threatening their child. However, retired Judge Martha Reynolds led a group of people who contended that Brooks's vigilante actions undermined the legal system. Legal experts debated the wider implications of the case for law enforcement accountability. Some argued that Brooks, as sheriff, had legal channels available to address Jefferson's misconduct, making his actions particularly egregious. Others suggested that Jefferson's political connections had made proper legal recourse impossible. The prosecution's closing statements emphasized Brooks's duty as a law enforcement officer to uphold the law rather than seek personal justice. They argued that his failure to investigate earlier complaints made him partially responsible for Jefferson's crimes, and that his violent reaction was driven more by guilt and anger than protective instincts. On January 15, 2011, after 4 days of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict in the trial of Malcolm Brooks, finding him guilty of second-degree murder. Brooks stood silently as the judge sentenced him to 18 years in prison. The jury's decision acknowledged the extreme emotional circumstances, but affirmed that Brooks's actions warranted significant consequences. During sentencing, Judge Richard Harrison recognized Brooks's distinguished service record and the exceptional circumstances surrounding the crime. However, he emphasized that Brooks's role as a law enforcement officer required him to uphold a higher standard of conduct. The sentence allowed for parole eligibility after serving 12 years, considering Brooks's clean prior record and the case's mitigating factors. Deputy Maurice Bennett's trial followed in March 2011, where the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his involvement in facilitating Jefferson's predatory actions. Multiple victims testified about Bennett's intimidation tactics and systematic efforts to silence potential complaints. The jury convicted Bennett on all counts, sentencing him to 12 years in prison without the possibility of early parole. His requirement to register as a sex offender effectively ended any future prospects of law enforcement employment. The federal investigation into the courthouse uncovered systemic failures that had allowed Jefferson's abuse of power to continue unchecked. The inquiry revealed evidence of destroyed complaints, manipulated court records, and a network of courthouse employees who had been coerced into silence. This led to significant reforms, including mandatory reporting protocols for judicial misconduct, enhanced security measures, and independent oversight of judicial interactions with defendants. The county also established a victim compensation fund, allocating substantial resources for settlements to Jefferson's victims. 23 women received compensation, though many expressed that financial restitution could not heal the psychological damage they had suffered. The settlements included provisions for ongoing counseling and support services. Belle Brooks relocated to another state to continue her education, seeking to escape the intense public scrutiny that had followed the case. In a written statement released through her attorney, she expressed hope that her father's actions would lead to meaningful changes in the justice system while acknowledging the profound impact on all those involved. The scandal's effects spread beyond Laurel, prompting a statewide review of judicial oversight procedures. In response, the state legislature passed the Judicial Accountability Act, which established stricter protocols for investigating misconduct allegations against judges and provided enhanced protections for individuals reporting abuse of power. Several former courthouse employees faced professional repercussions for their roles in enabling Jefferson's behavior. The State Bar Association reviewed cases handled by Jefferson, leading to appeals and new trials in instances where his misconduct may have influenced the outcomes. Rebuilding trust in the local justice system proved to be a long-term challenge. Brooks's imprisonment marked the end of an era in Laurel law enforcement. The new sheriff implemented extensive reforms, including mandatory ethics training and enhanced internal affairs oversight. The department established clear procedures for handling misconduct allegations, ensuring that no future complaints would be ignored or dismissed without a thorough investigation. The victims who came forward played a crucial role in exposing the corruption, though their courage came at great personal cost. Many faced ongoing struggles in rebuilding their lives and trusting authority figures. Support groups formed to assist survivors of judicial abuse, creating networks of advocacy and healing.